Thank you everybody and welcome along to our December 2022 council meeting. Good to see good gallery along tonight. After our AGM meeting, we have an apology from Councillor Campbell, who is not well tonight.
Through the chair, could I just note that I have to leave early tonight as well?
Yes, we'll clarify that Councillor Reynolds is president of the school association and they have their school presentation tonight. A couple of us have put apologies in, so Councillor Reynolds will be going on representing the councillors that can't be there tonight. So fully understand. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Having viewed tonight's agenda, does any councillor wish to declare a pecuniary interest? Silence noted. Thank you very much. 4.0 is confirmation of minutes 15th of November 2022. Can I have a move, please, for those? Councillor Terenius, thank you. And the seconder, Councillor Brown, thank you very much. Any discussion regarding those minutes to circulate? Thank you. I shall put that motion to acceptance then. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thanks. 5.0 Mayor's report. Mover and the seconder, thanks. Councillor Reid and Councillor Brown, thank you. And just one thing I need to add to that at the end is ABC radio interview yesterday morning in regards to the opening of the stadium and other major projects. And invite any comments from the floor at all? Questions? Councillor Reid.
The press on the grant received on coastal and estuarine risk mitigation. Some background, please, on how that came about and particularly council's contribution. I noted in the media it was 600,000 was reported. So where in the budget that is?
Just ask the General Manager for a bit of clarification on that, just to say over a time period. So.
Okay.
Yeah, through Mayor, it came about fairly quickly, the grant opportunity, and also the requirement to have the submission in also had a fairly tight time frame. So it wasn't something we were necessarily working toward or knowing it was coming up. The grant, I'm sure, is in the vicinity of 1.8 million from the federal government, and we're required to contribute at least 600,000, and it's over a 3-year term. Bulk of works being upgrades to stormwater outfalls along the southern beaches or through the southern beaches. So, and there's other actions with it, but that's the bulk of the proposed works. So this financial year will be more scoping with works to commence, physical works to commence, I suspect, next financial year. But there's no budget provisions being made at this stage because we don't budget for grants we don't have. So we need to factor that into the next year's budget allocation and financial management strategy.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. A question about the reporting of names when we report meetings. Are we required to report, for example, if it says owners of businesses or developers in general, are we required to report the names?
Not that I'm aware of. It's a what I've been attending, not the detail of and quite often a lot of those meetings are commercial in confidence as well.
Through the chair, it was disappointing that I couldn't make the opening of the sports stadium. Looked like a fantastic afternoon. Well done to all those that were involved. Moving forward with the sports stadium, how booked out is that venue looking with futsal, basketball and netball?
I might just refer to Jess in a moment for clarification there, but the booking inquiries has been phenomenal from inside and outside the municipality. We've held off on a lot of things to do with the bookings because we weren't 100% sure until very recently when it was going to be operational and what teething problems we might have. But certainly several clubs put forward quite a few booking dates already. So would you like to clarify anything else that's happened recently on that?
That's correct. People can request to book the facility through the website, and we're just registering their interest at this point while we wait for the local clubs to confirm their training nights and times. So it's priority to the local associations.
Thank you. The reason I ask is that obviously the stage 4 of the Sorell school build is the gymnasium, which we haven't got funding for. And I was wanting to see if there'd be actually utilisation from the community if that asset was to go ahead.
And you mean the school facility?
Yeah, so stage 4 of the school, which is unfunded.
Yeah, that would be a discussion from all parts of the education department back to us and vice versa. We'd like to think they would be using the community facilities as well. And if they had an asset up there that was available to the community, I should imagine the overflow would be taken up into that as well.
Yeah.
Just depends on the policy and the access outside of school hours, of course.
Thank you.
Councillor Trinius.
I'm not sure whether you can answer this after Marisol's question, but the expansion of the business at Dunalley, the owner, you've met with the owner of a business down there. Are you able to elaborate?
Yes, we met with the owners of the cannery on Monday this week and had general discussions about the possibilities of other business they'd like to do down there. And they wanted to show me and explain to me, and I feel it was necessary to take the general manager along for clarification on some of those points, and good discussion. Time will see whether it's able to happen or not. Very exciting what they're doing with that business, and they're doing very well. Young couple doing brilliant things with their menu and the amount of people down there every weekend. So we thought it was only appropriate to go down there and have a chat with them.
It's a great spot. Yeah, good business.
There's nothing else on my report. I should put that motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. 6.0, we have no supplementary items before us. 7.0, council workshops, workshop listed there, the various agenda items. And 8.1, we've got questions on the notice. I have a mover and seconder for these. Councillor Reid and Councillor Quattro there. And Robert, do you want to make a comment on those, please?
No, it's my response is done in a way actually self-explanatory. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions to the general manager on that response on 8.1? I should put the motion for that to be accepted. All those in favour? That's unanimously.
Yeah, I just want to add something.
Yep.
So I want to say that thank you for taking the time to answer those questions. Very informative. So I've found a couple of gaps there that I will be investigating and working on, particularly things that concern me as a councillor in terms of performance, and see ways that I can incorporate some ways to improve skills and measure performance and things like that. So that's something I'll be looking into. Yes. I just want to say that.
Thank you. 8.2 is another question on notice. Mover and seconder on that. Brown and Councillor Gatehouse. Thank you. And invite discussions on that question regarding safe public places and streets for children.
Yeah, thank you again for looking into this in depth to see what we have in place to provide these safe streets and public spaces for children. I can see for the responses that there's also two gaps that it's important to notice. One is that we don't have any programs for youth, and this is something I would like to investigate further as well and see how we can have something or research what would be appropriate. And then the other one is that we don't have also, the other gap is we don't have in place guidelines for crime prevention through environmental design. So the previous one is at a community level, and this one will be at a planning level. And so that's something to investigate as well. How can we incorporate crime prevention into the design and planning of first council proposed public spaces and also buildings, and then see how we can work with community and other proposers to bring that in. So these are the two gaps that I can see from the answers. So thank you for answering that. Yeah.
Thank you. Comments on that question? I'm sure that motion should second. So all those in favour? Passed unanimously. Just we have made addition here to the agenda of questions without notice to councillors. Is there any councillor wishing to raise a point or a question at this stage? No, thank you. So I'll move on to departmental reports. Move from second to the departmental reports, please. Councillor Reynolds, Councillor Reid, thank you. And invite questions to the General Manager or department heads that are here at the moment.
Through the Mayor,
Yes.
on a question for the General Manager on page 10, the meeting with Transport Division about the Sorell Rivulet Bridge. If we could have an update on that, please.
Yes, through the Mayor. It was a very productive meeting because I was able to, first of all, meet with the now project manager of the bypass project and Midway Point junction upgrade. So a range of matters was able to get some clarity on there with regards to signage, our signage, future maintenance obligations. We're still sorting out the details, but we're certainly productive and heading in the right direction. The second meeting straight after with the General Manager was around clarifying Council's view or Council's position on adopting the prior principal route to the peninsula, that section from McDonald's through to the new junction there up in Nugent Road, and that we were not of a mind to take on the bridge in its current form with funding from the government. We'd rather see it upgraded or replaced, I should say, before we take on that road asset overall. So it's just a general discussion on how that may be facilitated. State Growth are interested in submitting a bridge renewal program grant application that we have done successfully twice in the past to do it in partnership with us to try and get the funding for the federal government. So hasn't been resolved, but it's certainly something that they're more than aware of, and they're also doing pavement condition assessments as well of that section of Arthur Highway that will potentially be transferred to us. So it's slow progress, but it's progress.
Good to hear.
And through me, we're not necessarily in any hurry to take on that bridge in its current form anyway.
Councillor Gardner.
Can I ask about the facilities maintenance register? There's a lot of sort of incidental repairs that may be wear and tear, but some appear to be vandalism, removal graffiti, washout due to fire, replaced door locks, etc. Is there a policing issue, or would cameras around the place improve the situation? Is it ongoing? Well, it is ongoing. Is it getting worse? Is the situation getting worse? That general need for maintenance, or
Yeah.
what can we do to?
For me, I'm not sure what we can do about it, to be honest. We've certainly had a spike over the last 12 months in vandalism of our facilities. Principally around Southern Beaches and Sorell, the residential areas. We have a range of CCTV in place, and we provide that to the police. My view would be it seems to have no deterrent role to those who do it. We've had quite severe vandalism of the stadium in the last couple of months. We're full view of the cameras, completely oblivious to that. And ultimately, those responsible for that vandalism of the stadium and elsewhere were identified, and police have taken action, but given the age of the people involved, it appears to be hardly acting as a deterrent to the police who are involved. So there's frustration all around. The stadium vandalism has cost us, with the repairs of $20,000 plus 2 separate insurance claims of $5,000 each. So it's a big frustration for us and for the police. I'm not sure, I don't have any answers to how to deal with it that's effective at this stage.
Might have the policing levels have increased significantly, and then will increase again when the station is opened after Christmas here. We'll go from 4 to 6 people operating in this area to approximately 16. And we do have quite a few of the new police officers residing in this municipality who have been quite conscious in their reporting, even off duty, of various things noticed. But there's been a bit of an excavation, as there nearly always is leading up to Christmas. Type of financial circumstances certainly lead to that, and vandalism is a bit the same at the moment. Police are doing their job quite well by all accounts, and now regular reporting with police, but they're as frustrated as what we are.
Are there any plans to increase the number of cameras sort of around the town in general, rather than just in the locations such as the stadium or the council chambers? Or
Yeah, through me, we have a current program of renewing or updating, upgrading, I should say, the existing cameras as technology improves. We don't have any budget allocation or any program to put additional cameras out in the community. However, we have applied for a grant through the LJT to do so, and we're in the process. We've progressed through to sort of the scoping stage now, so that's promising. We put in a submission as part of the last federal budget to get additional, I'd say, community cameras rather than site-specific cameras, but we weren't successful in getting that. But this most recent fund through the LJT seems to be promising at this stage.
We also utilise or community utilise, the police utilise an enormous amount of private business cameras as well, as part of their, like I say, network of gathering information on the movement of after hours.
thank you.
Councillor Tremors?
Yeah, thank you. Just further on the Sorell Rivulet Bridge, I came across that this evening. I think the state government needs to do, state growth needs to do something about it soon, because it seems to have sunk. There was a pool of water that when I went across, it just went everywhere. It's quite dangerous. It was quite deep, and I think you know, they really need to, but it's been on the cards. How many years now?
12 that I'm aware of.
12. Yeah. Anyway,
It
that's
went
my,
back to when.
my opinion,
Bill was
and-
general manager.
and also, could I ask about 67 Tasman Highway, General Manager?
Yeah, through the mayor, so, was it senior planner and I met with the new owner and development proponent of that site, so they're interested in exploring any subdivision potential. It's zoned residential, so it has that capability. Main issue is access and land ownership, that access may have to be located over. So early discussions, but it would involve council-owned land and at this stage Tas Networks owned land in order to get an access in an appropriate location. So I wasn't aware exactly the permit was issued around 2004 or thereabouts for the subdivision, proposing a new road junction, but that's obviously lapsed, and the new owner's keen to progress any opportunity to subdivide it.
How much land's there?
I couldn't have off the top of my head. There's the potential for maybe a dozen or so lots. It's not a huge property, but
No.
and it could potentially connect to the east and come out through Leitrim Avenue as well. But there's another owner in control of that parcel, so it might just be this on its own. But
Thank you.
nothing's been submitted yet.
Okay, thank you.
There is no other points to the department reports, so I shall put the motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. 11.0, there's no petitions before us at the moment. 12.0, land use planning. The Mayor advised in accordance with the provisions of Part 2, Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2015, the intention of the Council to act as a planning authority pursuant under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993 is to be noted. In accordance with Regulation 25, the Council will act as a planning authority in respect to those matters appearing under item 10 of this agenda, inclusive of any supplementary items. 12.1 is past minutes from the 6th of December 2022. A mover, please. Councillor Brown, and I'll take that as Councillor Rudd as second. Thank you. And invite any discussion on those minutes as circulated. Okay, thank you. I shall put the motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Thank you. Thirteen point one is amendment to the 2022-23 fees and charges. Move for this, please. Reynolds, and seconder. Councillor Gagev, thank you. And we had a question earlier on. This, I'll just ask the clarification from the general manager on this added fee to fees and charges.
Thank you, Mayor. So this has been a long time coming, in that we've had a number of requests to generally lease or license council land, and historically it's been done in a fairly inconsistent fashion, particularly with regard to fees. And we've sort of, the last 2 or 3 years, we've generally not entered into any leases or licenses until we had a better understanding of the history of some of these other areas and the approach, and also to get a more consistent approach ourselves to how we would impose a fee or a charge. So these matters, that was interesting playing words, matters, I don't know where that came from. These matters are generally of an opportunistic nature to the owners. It's they come in a fairly on an infrequent basis, but it's just to formalise a consistent approach where we'll have a flat fee which will be indexed per annum for those private persons who wish to lease or license some adjoining utilised council land, and we assess each one on its merits and take into account a range of considerations, both in an operational sense and a longer term strategic sense, but we don't have many of them, but there is benefit in having a system set up to deal with them, which is what we're proposing with this additional fee.
We certainly do have a lot of walkways, parcels of land that have boundaries have become smudged over the years, I suppose, and as development encroaches upon us, quite often it's highlighted some of these areas, and some of them have come before us over the years for tidying up with people's boundaries and everything. So I see this fee as delivering a set process for council staff to deal with those matters. Any comments from the floor, Councillor Reid?
Thank you, through the Mayor. Two things. One is this situation's common in the Southern Beaches, particularly Dodgers Ferry, where there's a lot of walkways in the original subdivisions that have never been activated, or as in my own property, are just effectively part of the yard and isolated in the middle of nowhere in terms of joining up with other walkways, etc. Has council identified those parcels that are likely to be, we're likely to be approached about, in terms of ones that there would be no issue over leasing, or is that work still to be done? Or would it be a case by case?
Yeah, it's more case by case, Councillor Reid, because on our GIS system, we've certainly identified all land that we own or that we lease or license, either people doing so off us or us doing it off the Crown. So we haven't done a detailed assessment of what parcels may have lease or licensing potential. I would say more often than not, the requests that we get are for, in the case, I'll pick on your property, I know the walkway you're referring to is actually on a cliff, goes up a cliff, or part of it, which is probably impractical. But the broader casement that includes this walkway often also includes the road reserve still. So we can't actually neatly cut it off and attach it to the property without going through quite an involved statutory process for a fair bit of cost and no real great return to council. So this alternate approach is something which is more of a short-term basis. It is helpful for the owner, and it stays with the owner only. So if the land is sold, the lease or license becomes extinguished, if you like, becomes null and void. And we actually drew upon some learnings from the prior Hobart Council CEO, who advised, who now consults to our legal advisors, who advised that there were literally hundreds of these in place at Hobart Council. They're a comparatively simple approach, as I said, runs with the land, runs with the owner, sorry, not the land, runs with the owner, and unable to be built on, not able to be owned, responsibility with the owner to maintain, and just, reflects what is practical at that ground level. So no strategic value to the council, no impost to the public. It's just something to assist those owners.
Any of those walkways in the past have been considered that may be required in the future as development happens for drainage easements, to give us access to certain areas for drainage. A few times that's happened, but it's all on a merit basis as we develop those different areas.
Could I just ask then, in the case of we needed a parcel of land that has been leased, how easy would it be to regain it legally? If you've leased it out and...
Yeah, the pro forma instrument that our lawyers have developed, so the licence pro forma, certainly has the ability for both parties to extinguish. There's obviously a notice period, but that's built into it as well.
So it wouldn't be difficult.
No,
if it was
it certainly can be done.
Yeah, thank you. The question of, this is just a right of use of land, but not a right of development. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Reid.
Through to the chair. The amount of the fee is a flat fee. Normally, a flat fee is regressive in that it impacts. I'm just wondering about the area and whether these are consistently relatively small parcels and therefore a flat fee seems appropriate, or whether there's a wide variety and a flat fee would be regressive, impacting small parcels more than it is large parcels, etc.
Yeah, through me, we did look at that, and I think that's the issue we had when we did a review of this. Jess helped with this some time ago. It was, I think, a technical term is dog breakfast as far as the consistency that had been applied to the fee structure. It was absolutely all over the place. So these are generally, they're fairly consistent in size and in domestic scale to the property, but in trying to apply a sliding scale or a pro rata portion to them was just, it didn't seem to be worth the hassle for the size of the land parcels. And our view is that it's certainly done as a convenience to the owners, and they have the option of, it's a flat fee. If you're that desperate to lease or license a land office, then this is it.
Right.
The amount of, the amount of staff time that gets spent on these is proportionally miles above what we get back in as based on this license fee, which is why I'm not at all interested in selling some of these, because it's just, it's a negative return.
A follow-up question, if I may, then, in terms of a sliding or per area, was that considered in terms of, rather than a completely flat fee? So a starting point and then the area applied to get the final fee.
We did delve into that briefly with our lawyers, but it was just, we were overcomplicating it for something that was comparatively simple. And as I said, it's something where the benefit really is to the owner, not to us.
Mhm.
So if it's something that they wish to partake in, then they know it's applied consistently across all parcels. And these are, like I said, these are fairly small strips of land or corners of land, and you're trying to work out something transparent that takes into account the rating value of the land, the equivalent rating value or rental value. We wouldn't bother doing it at all, to be honest. It's just not worth the time.
Thank you.
Could I just ask one more? What's the incentive for the landowner then to pay $1,500 if the status quo, if they've got the land there in front of them?
Well, through the mayor, a lot of these, as Councillor identified, actually form part of people's backyards. These are really obscure parcels of land that have I'm not sure what they were thinking when they conjured them up, but they have no real strategic value or practical sense. They don't connect land together or act through in an access sense. So it's surprising how many requests we get for this. And sorry?
To purchase.
Or to purchase or to lease or license, because people have generally been looking after them for many years and want a formal license. So, and from an insurance point of view as well. So, I'm not doing it. We didn't propose this as an opportunistic effort to profit out of this. It's more a reflection of costs involved in setting up this standard pro forma, and like I said, the ease of administering it, given the myriad of different sizes and shapes of parcels of land that we're dealing with.
Thank you.
If there is nothing else on this motion, I'll put 13.1 for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Leads nicely into stormwater to 14.1, stormwater asset management plan. Have a move for this motion, please. Sorell and Councillor Greenhouse, thank you. Invite discussion from the floor. It's not comprehensive when you start reading some of the reporting on what we don't think much of hidden underneath the ground. It's quite amazing. And, I think over the last couple of years, with wet years, it's absolutely highlighted the importance, the urgency, and in some cases the desperation of what we fix a lot of historical issues, and there's a fair job in front, and this is part of it. So. Any further comment from the floor or questions?
Yes, so, stormwater asset management plan, right? So yes, I have a question about, I didn't see anything in the plan about mitigating or eliminating stormwater to go into the system, and I had a question about that, if there is part of the strategy.
Through me, the asset management plan acts more of a, I mean, as a rule, we do try and avoid, where we can, directing concentrated stormwater into our assets in the first instance, or into a receiving environment anyway. There's ways you go about it through on-site detention at the subdivision stage and development stage. And we also have the benefit now of the stormwater system management plan we've had for 3 to 4 years through Insura, that we're required to provide or to have in place by the Urban Drainage Act. So that, combined with the asset management plan, which looks more at the condition of those assets, the location, their value, their replacement value, but then value, forecasting out required either maintenance or capex on renewal and upgrades as well. So the combined effect of all that body of work is that, and obviously the last couple of years is a case in point as far as identifying issues that we need to try and deal with. So it's not specifically identified in this document, but it's something which we're trying to achieve where we can. It can be challenging, of course. Great understatement.
Might add the importance of having the asset management plan and having those surveys in place. We learned quite a few years ago when we first started doing a lot of the asset management survey work, that in some places we had inappropriate sized pipes. We had certain size larger pipes running into smaller manholes or smaller pipes out of it. It's just generational as services build up. But that also comes a long way in determining how we then have to deal with any new stormwater going into the system as well. And we have to understand those assets, what sizes, where they go, what the capabilities of them are before we can deal with the matters of stormwater as a whole. Any other questions regarding this motion at all?
What do we do there about stormwater in areas that don't have any management for that? I'm not quite sure how that works.
I'll ask the general clarification on that, but certainly the insurer reports have highlighted a lot of the areas and have given us a better understanding of overland floods and the capacity of different storm events as well, that helps us in the planning stage and also in the development stage as well, with planning. To the last general manager to clarify a little bit more.
Yeah, through the mayor, that we've certainly, it's become more than apparent for a range of historic, now residential, previously shack areas that had no storm infrastructure built when they were subdivided back in the 50s and 60s, that's causing some pretty major problems. For staff, it's something where we will deal with council as far as the practicalities and costs of scoping up the the retrofitting of stormwater systems to those areas. Some, it's a difficult and expensive proposition, particularly where the stormwater system management plan, so that the 1 in 100 year storm event inundation modelling shows these areas severely impacted. So often there's no ability to get an outlet by virtue of how low these areas are. So unless you introduce mechanical pumping of some sort, there's nowhere for the water to go.
You can't expect us as a council to plan for the 1 in 100, with the facilities we have. But what about strategically using the existing wetlands? They're great filtration systems anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, through me, the issue is that I think everybody, particularly in southern beaches, south has realised that the carrying capacity of the land is just zero now. Like, it's so waterlogged that the likes of Councillor Terence, who's been in the area for quite a while, has never seen it in the state that it's in. So even the wetlands and lower lying areas just historically could act as a sponge, if you like, using a technical term. There's just nothing there. There's no ability there. So I've been in council for 9 years, and we're now just in the last 3 to 4 months dealing with some fairly upset and impacted ratepayers who never had an issue. It's really significant. It's just we have no feasible or economically viable way of dealing with it, because they're at the bottom of a catchment. There's no outlet and there's no fall to get an outlet. So it's not an easy one to fix. So.
It's good for the frogs.
This also leads back to the grants that we received on the West Waterways. In many cases, either naturally or by man-made pipes or flushing effects out onto the foreshore. The work we've been doing for quite a few years with council staff, and as well as new developments, is trying to minimise that pollutants that go out through those stormwater outlets, and that grant plays into this pretty well about how we channel it out into our waterways, how we filter it, how we stop erosion, all related to something that most people don't even notice is there most of the time. And it's something, as we've seen at other council meetings and workshops, that our manager of engineering services, Russell Fox, is extremely passionate about. And extremely, probably one of the key people in the state for knowledge in this area as well, myself. Councillor Reid.
Through the mayor. On, I've just checked the page numbering, pages 14, etc. in the plan, there's a table, technical levels of service, with some budget, current and recommended attached to it. Where does that fit in council's budgeting process in terms of, for most of the items on the table, it's a doubling of current performance, for example. The first one's acquisition, current performance 410,000, recommended performance 800,000, and so on in the table. It's pretty much double right the way through. I'm just wondering how that does flow into council's budgeting.
Through the mayor, it's a sobering read, because we certainly
sobering after Christmas, I think, imagine.
we certainly have a program maintenance system in place, which is incorporated in our operational budget. We have, informed by the prior, now to be replaced, asset management plan, capital renewals that are required based on condition generally. But in terms of upgrading assets, in this sense in stormwater, that's these recommended costs we have to deal with as part of the annual budget process and incorporate into the financial management strategy. So we've been really lucky with some funding that we've received from the federal government through our SES for stormwater upgrades just out here, other side of the emergency services hub, which will have the effect of protecting dozens and dozens of houses to the south from any inundation risks. And now that the grant that we've received for some of the beaches will benefit, more so in a quality discharge sense rather than risk. But part of that grant that we had for here also looks at it is going to propose an upgrade to the capacity through 7th Ave out to the coast as well. So that will, and that's all predicated on that stormwater system management plan that identifies those inundation risks, which we never had before. So it's scarily accurate, the volume that was done. But it comes down to budgetary considerations. We balance off all those asset upgrades and new assets that we want to put in across all our asset classes, and we have to cut our cloth to suit each year.
The advantage also of having such a detailed list is that if and when money does come available, we have a very good idea of the costings of everything to be able to be quick out of the blocks to apply to those funds. And we've seen that how effective Russell and his team is at that with various projects like along the fence line over here as a start, which makes a big difference. We can receive substantial funds from outside sources. There's nothing else on that stormwater.
Yeah, just a
Yes,
question, thank
Councillor.
you. I couldn't find any filter systems that we have as assets right now, currently. There's only the gross pollutant trucks. And so the question is, if we have plans to have these filter systems, these are to capture heavy metals and suspended solids and oils and hydrocarbons. Most of the water that goes into beaches, water bodies, wetlands, and rivers don't have them, or all of them don't have them. Through discussions, yet I know that the receiving body or who has the management of that receiving water body should be sort of triggering the need for it, if it's Crown Land or whomever it is on the receiving end. Is council considering, or is this plan considering incorporating that without being asked to? Is that something that this plan would look into?
Yeah, through me, it's generally, so you're right, Councillor Mercasada, that there are a number of gross pollutant traps that we have around the municipality, which are more the course level control of items getting into the waterways. The SPELs they're called, I won't try and describe the acronym because I don't know what it is, but it's basically for the more contaminated sediment and finer types of sediment that they do exist, but they are, to date that I'm aware of, are all contained on private property that were required to be put in by developers. They are very high maintenance assets to look after. Gross pollutant traps less so, but those SPELs, which deal with hydrocarbons and sediment, that I'm aware of are all, we don't have any. We're not necessarily, based on discussions with depot staff, which we don't have a great deal of in the stormwater crew, and Russell Fox, engineering manager, is, we don't have any immediate plans to install that type of asset. But I need to confirm with Russell when he's back from leave about if there's any further GPTs that we might be putting in, or other treatment through the use of more natural swales or systems like that to try and take out those materials out of the water, try and polish the water before it goes out. But I'll deal with Russell on that when he returns.
Nothing else, so I shall put the motion of 14.1. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. 14.2 is the dog management plan. I can move to this, please. Deputy Mayor, and the seconder. Councillor Mercasada. And I open up the floor for discussion, please.
I think this makes good sense. Don't think it needs much amendment at all.
we have the amendment, right? So we have the amendment proposed.
There is an amendment, yes.
Um,
Run through that.
So agenda item, yeah, the proposed amendment to one, amend part 4 of the objectives.
Just for the circulation. Emergency.
That was a different area than Marisol.
Oh.
There was a proposed,
Marisol.
Yeah. there was a proposed amendment discussed to clarify some of the wording and points in it. The councillor wish to,
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
all right, would you like to speak to that
Thank
before I put the amendment, please?
Thank you. The amendment is to clarify Part 4 objectives and the Part 5 responsible dog ownership. And would you like me to read it out or?
Certainly wouldn't hurt to.
Yep, okay.
Sorry, that would clarify some of those other wording changes.
Okay,
we
thank
spoke
you.
about.
So the amendment's in two parts. The first to amend Part 4 objectives of the dog management plan by including that council provides information to dog owners so that they understand their responsibilities under the Dog Control Act 2000, and that council undertakes its statutory obligations specified in the Dog Control Act 2000. So the intent of that is just to provide some clarification. And the second part is to amend Part 5, responsible dog ownership of the dog management plan, by including 4 dot points. They are that dog owners have a responsibility to look after the welfare of their dogs by providing sufficient and suitable food, water and accommodation. Where a dog requires treatment by a veterinarian, such care is provided. If a person fails to adequately care for their dog, RSPCA Tasmania will investigate. Council encourages dog owners to exercise and socialise their dogs, as this reduces the likelihood of a dog barking excessively and creating a nuisance. Council will provide via social media, community news and website information. Actually, I'll just amend that myself. Council will promote responsible dog ownership via social media, community news and website information. And the last one is council animal management officers will, while investigating complaints, undertake door-to-door registration checks and undertake dog patrols in exercise areas, provide advice and assistance to dog owners on responsible dog ownership, such as measures to keep dogs under effective control, techniques to reduce barking, and making sure they take bags when going to an exercise area to pick up after their dog. My apologies, there's actually 3 parts. The last one is to include in Part 16 off-lead dog exercise area. That council provides dog faeces bins at all declared exercise areas and other common dog walking routes. These bin locations and exercise areas are included on council's website.
Thank you.
So as you can hear, that they're expanding and making more readily understandable the provisions that we already manage.
Thank you. With that amendment, as read out there, thank you very much, Councillor Reid. Can I put that motion, that amendment for acceptance, please? All those in favour? Passed unanimously. We now have the amended motion with that added to it. Any more discussion on that motion at all? Councillor Batters.
Can I just say, going forward, can we look at some cat management plan?
Cat management comes under a whole different subject altogether under state law. We do discuss that on a regular basis. It's a frustration of a lot of people, but it is a separate act that takes care of that, and we have to discuss it further later.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. In the, it's my understanding in the public questions, when it was out for comment, there were some suggestions around earlier moving the restriction times back from 6 p.m. to 4 p.m. in some parts to better cater to beach access at popular times. That isn't mentioned in the report, other than to say that the standard times will continue. I just wondered if that actually, I'd heard that was of some interest, particularly in Primrose Sands area, but just wondered if it actually made it into the council as a formal representation that we know of.
I'm not sure that,
There
councillor.
was some discussion on the points of consistency with other surrounding
Yes.
municipalities that we've had at the last couple of reviews of this, and that there was some, I suppose compromise is the right word, on with the hours at the last amendment of it to deal with the amount of, by changing the hours slightly back to more for each time, was offset by I think the days in the month that was required for these no dogs yet. So it had been dealt with previously. There's nothing else then on 14.2. I shall put the motion with the amendment. All those in favour of acceptance? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. 14.3 is the Sorell Council Municipal Road Map. Number moved, thank you. Councillor Reid, thank you very much. Councillor Frenius, thank you. Invite discussion from the floor. Amazing when you look at some of the networks where they go to or where they don't go to.
I have a general question about it.
Yes,
So how and when can we and the public have access to these updated maps?
It's available to the public
It is
anytime.
already available.
Yeah, so we'd actually thought it had been updated. Previously, we've discovered that it hadn't actually made its way to council, so it's a bit of a, in a sense, it's a basic administrative practice to make sure it's up to date. It's in our interests and ratepayers' interests to make sure it's accurate. I wouldn't say that means that ratepayers are necessarily happy with it, but there's mechanisms in place where if there's an objection to the map, ratepayer can raise that with council, and there's subsequent mechanisms to that if they're not happy with the outcome of council's review through the magistrates court. So it's something that should be reviewed at least every 2 to 3 years. It's just, like I said, we thought we'd done it a couple of years ago, but we hadn't, so it's a slightly overdue. But it's otherwise a publicly accessible document or set of information.
some of the issues that we've experienced is long-term country roads that council may have maintained in the past that weren't actually our asset, or vice versa. Weren't maintained that were our asset. So there's a few different aspects there that come into play at various times, as well as all the new ones being added to it. We've also come across many roads and subdivisions in the past that through the development application are meant to be handed over to council as part of the development, but never were. So this, keeping an eye on this register helps us maintain the correct paperwork or ownership of the assets that are ours. There's no more comments on that. Sorry,
Excuse me,
Councillor Reid, yes.
through you, Mayor. On page 66, the summary part, it just says a summary of road names where there's some amendment. Broadly, what sort of amendments? Does this mean these are roads where council's taken on responsibility or there's been that's the question. What sorts of amendments?
Through Mayor, the majority are actually where the segments identified we're not maintaining or haven't maintained. So it's actually a lessening of what was on the moment, the current version. But also particularly through the current resheeting program, that we've identified that maybe we should be doing some segments that we hadn't been doing. So it's a combination, but the likes of Hacks Road is certainly one where it's had a fairly checkered past, and there's certainly fairly strong views from some residents as to how it should be dealt with, but some we've sought legal advice on because there's a couple of elements to the process to modify this that you need to be really careful of under some supportive legislation. So we sought views on Hacks Road and also on, I'm looking for it. I can't see it, sorry. No, it's just Hacks Road actually, because the other I'm thinking of, sorry, we've already identified as a road that we don't maintain. So those that require a fair bit of care and consideration will certainly get a separate view. I've been involved in these matters at other councils where it's ended up badly for all parties in court and great expense. So you need to be fairly careful with the manner in which you deal with it.
Thank you. I should put that motion 14.3 for acceptance. All those in favour? Ask unanimously. Thank you. 15.1 is community grants program. Some of the Tasmania country music muster. Everybody likes country music. Council Trees and Council Brown there. Thank you very much. But in discussions on the year hard boot scooting day down at Primrose Sands that we all enjoyed.
I informed you before, I think I've got Chad Morgan going this year.
Yeah.
Someone
Deputy
says-
Mayor's Christmas
that's
mustard had me
amazing.
down there, yeah.
Man, we got him quite cheaply, didn't we? $2,000.
2 years left, but we're going to get him cheaply. So it'll be the highlight of the day at the Primrose RSL. Quite an amazing event that brings a lot of people into that area, and quite a few people stay for the week leading up and after, so it's good for the township of Primrose. Anything else on that at all? Thank you. So I'll put the motion for acceptance of the $2,000 grant towards the music muster. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. 16.1 is the executive summary financial report for November 2022. Have a mover, please. Thank you. Councillor Gatehouse second. Councillor Reid. Gatehouse second. And Scott's waited patiently over there for the last hour and a half for another question, so here's your opportunity if you'd like. Refer to Scott, our financial officer.
I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. I've got one through you, Mayor,
Thank you.
which may not be Scott's, it might be the general manager's, but on page 88, the roads, it's about the variances, the road resheeting program, 140,000. Variance is over what was, it's an increase in what the actual compared to. What's the reason for the increase?
Through me, do you know, Scott? I'm just thinking, was it the actual tender submission amount, or I wanted to take it on notice, Councillor Reid, because I need to talk to Russell. I know that we had budgeted a certain amount for the entirety of the resheet program. Unless Scott knows,
It was actually an agenda item on the September council meeting.
was it in response to the actual tender, just what the actual tender amount was?
Yeah.
Rather than being any change, it's exactly what the tender value was.
Okay,
compared
thank
to
you.
What we budgeted for prior.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
It's encouraging to see that very solid performance on rates collected year to date, which is a significant amount up on last year and the last few years, and the last 4 years have been excellent, but see that increased again is a good effort by staff.
I do have a technical question.
Yes.
So when we look at property infrastructure, what is the number made of? Is it revaluation line or?
It's the full value of all assets.
The
So,
value,
plan-
is it cost?
No, the replacement value. So we have a rotation basis on all asset classes. So per year. So the most recent one we did was stormwater, so that would be the closest one to replacement value, whereas older ones wouldn't be, but they go around in a cycle. So they're kept as close to replacement value.
Yeah, Jeremy, so it's
Like-
between a 4 to 5 year cycle of asset revaluations by asset class, so is the next one land improvements?
I think so.
Yeah, so it's generally 4 years and sometimes 5.
Adjustments in the meantime?
No, we don't index it, no.
Another question, please.
Yes.
So when we look at investments, what investments do council hold? It just says investments. Are they projects in JV development?
So in reference to that question, there's two, what am I trying to say? There's two different forms of investments. They're both investments within the class of investments, but there's two different forms. So we have near to 7 million in term deposits. And then we have a further 29 million, which represents an ownership share in Taswater, which is 1.51%, and an ownership share in the Copping Refuse Disposal Authority, which is commonly known as Southern Waste Solutions, and that's a 24% share. Alright.
Just a point of clarification, I have asked this before, on page 86 it says land tax is above budget by 24,000.
Yeah.
And yet in the annual report it says that we're not subject, local government isn't subject to land tax. And I can't find the page, but I remember thinking, because I did ask this once before.
Yeah.
Um,
Some of it isn't subject to land tax. I'm wondering what section it's actually.
I'll look up.
I can have a look. I'll have a
I'll
look
look to it.
and come back to you.
Depending on how the annual general classifies our land, I'm not sure what it is now, but we were paying about $80,000 a year in land tax, but some of our properties, when they're classified, annual general don't attract land tax, but most do.
Right. I remember asking that once before and
And we've been doing a fair bit of work on that for probably 5 years now, and trying to eliminate some of the sale of assets originally were designed around eliminating some of that land tax. Just have to clarify a little bit more with a bit more detail.
thank you.
Thank you. No more questions then on the financials? I shall put the motion for acceptance. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to questions from the public. This is your chance.
Okay, should I ask?
If you could just stand, please, and just say your name and what suburb you're from, so it's not very. Thank you.
Can I just ask about any progress that's been made on the end of Canis Street at Blue Lagoon? That's a real mess and has been now for quite a few years, and nothing seems to be progressing on that at all.
I'll refer that for an update from the GM on who has lived and breathed that, those issues.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So, I'm not sure where to start on this. We have an engineering concept to propose a new discharge point through the dunes onto the Blue Lagoon Beach. Earlier, we had a concept to direct discharge north through the park and under the car park to the boat ramp. That was fairly heavily not supported by a number of residents down there. We effectively shelved that concept, but it'd be well over a year ago we did that and progressed with the design and then DA for the, I'll call it the southern outlet instead to the beach. That too has met with a fair bit of opposition from some residents. We, at the same time, we're dealing with an interest group. I can't think of the correct term at the moment, but also a Coast Care Lantern group around the Blue Lagoon in footprint, and the fact that there was a management plan some years ago that council and an earlier iteration of the group had developed. It's long overdue. So it's a case of what we put first, and with the benefit of now having an NRM resource on council, we've broken up into a few different segments of the project. So it's in part, there's a need to drain Canard Street more effectively. The houses directly behind, and to get that into the lagoon. And then obviously there's the issue of getting the lagoon out when it gets to a certain height. So through a lot of community consultation, where we've landed is that the DA has been prepared for that southern outlet option, but hasn't been finalised, hasn't been progressed. It's on hold. We are instead working with the Blue Lagoon group more broadly around updating the management plan first, which is almost done, I believe, which will incorporate the longer term management of Blue Lagoon, particularly the need to have an effective discharge location for it. In the interim, we've got a design done for, so there's two designs. There's the Canard Street drainage design plus the actual outlet design. We're progressing to get a scope of works and quotes from companies to do the Canard Street works, which we think if we installed, we could still get it to work to an extent to better drain that area without with being able to deal with the existing discharge option that we have now, which is that small 150mm PVC pipe. So you can probably notice we're using that on occasion when the levels get too high. So what we're proposing, and those works in Canard Street won't occur till well into the new year, calendar year. It won't be perfect because until we get the better long-term option for managing the water levels in the lagoon, it's only going to be an interim improvement to.
Would that ever include dredging that lagoon at all to make it deeper?
Sorry, say that again.
Would that include dredging that lagoon at all to make it deeper?
One of the options in the management plan is the actual depth of the lagoon. Now, I know from years ago when the thing was dry, it seems like another lifetime. Works have been done to remove component gear, just have some more capacity in that lagoon. I'm not going to preempt what's in the management plan that's going to come as a recommendation, but the notion of increasing the depth of it in some way, shape or form may be feasible, but there's just no way we go near it whilst there's, in the conditions it would make an absolute disaster and mess. But our NRM officer is working through those management plan options, like I said, which includes coming up with a permanent outfall discharge option, because we need that. But it's not an easy one to get resolved because we have opinions and strong opinions at absolutely opposite ends of the spectrum about wanting to do something and do it 2 years ago and to not do a great deal and to let it sort of sort itself out. We're just trying to chart a course where we get an outcome that is going to protect assets, protect property, and also not have a detrimental effect on the lagoon operation as well. It's just taken a long time.
Would that include, I mean, down the track, would that include repairing that area of Cannon Street, so like that grass verge between Cannon Street and the lagoon itself? Because that is just deteriorated to a real mess now.
Yeah, through me, I gave an undertaking to the residents along Cannon Street. I wanted to extend or formalise the parking area that is closer to the beach, which generally is, until 2 years ago, was always dry, to extend it back along Cannon Street, but I got told in uncertain terms that it was a poor idea not to pursue it. So the concept we've come up with is to reinstate the turning circle, but to not formally extend the parking area, but certainly once it's dried out, and if we can get this system to work, once those verge areas are dried out, we will make good, but we won't be formalising a big parking area that was completely unacceptable to those residents. It's a
Well,
challenge.
they park on the verge anyway, I mean.
Yeah, I was referring to, I'd like to have gravelled it and really made it so you get a lot more cars there, so it works better and presents better, but there was certainly no appetite from the residents to fundamentally change that grass area.
It won't be a grass area much longer, the way it's going.
Yeah,
It's just going to be totally denuded, because people just drive their cars up there, and even though it's wet, the four-wheel drive idiots go and hoon around there and just rip it apart. So it's really gone downhill.
okay. Well, I'm certainly happy to have a look at it. I haven't been down there for quite a few weeks, so if we need to do something in the interim to keep vehicles off that, then we can certainly do that, but I'll have a look.
We are, excuse me, we are aware that area is popular for a lot of different reasons, and if you remember, it wasn't that many years ago, we actually had the motion before us at council to put the new duck boards down there so that a lot of the mums could get their carts and that down with the kids a lot easier, because it's a beach used by a lot of families. Unfortunately, that's had to go backwards while all this other negotiations and consultations taking place, but we're fully aware that all that's got to be reinstated to an acceptable level as those solutions are found. So any other questions at all? Sharon?
Just one about your dog control thing. Most weekends, if the dog's going to take off, it seems to take off Friday night, Saturday morning. I've run up to council several times and said, could your after hours person come and collect the dog? The answer's been the after hours person doesn't do that. Are you going to look at your after hours person becoming responsible for dogs that take off and coming to collect them, because it causes havoc, as I'm sure it does with other people, with my dog. And I've had bulls come over weekend too, and I've had huge problems with bulls. Is your after hours person responsible, particularly for dogs?
I was just plugging your computer again to answer that. I don't believe, as in conversations, that our scope is to be everything to everybody on dogs or livestock management. It is a bit more simple than that, but I'll ask for clarification from Jean.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Certainly livestock, our advice to staff is absolutely not. In terms of out of hours, I'll have to come back to Sharon because I need to double check sorry? Okay, so if it's a dangerous dog situation, they will respond, but if it's just dog at large or someone's managed to snaffle a dog that was at large, we don't send the on-call staff out to collect those.
I just find, because I've got a border collie, any border collie that goes loose in the area ends up at my place because everyone thinks it's mine. And I get stuck with it, and it's always a weekend. And, to me, that's pretty unreasonable. I'm reading what you want done, read dogs, and you don't seem to be considering this aspect of it.
Through that, if we're able to satisfy ratepayers' expectation of dog management, there'd be probably 100 dog management officers and it's just not economically viable for ratepayers to pay for that service. So we're trying to get a balance between, managing the resources we've got and providing a level of service that's reasonable, but it's, we've done a comparison with other councils and, from a resourcing point of view and a level of service point of view, and we provide a higher level of service compared to most councils with respect to dog management.
Yeah, sure, Dodgers Ferry. I read from the previous, when you were going through it before it opened up to us guys, that you've made the decision to pass the amendments and everything to the dog management process. So I'm just wondering, firstly, is it any point us sort of banging on about what we like, or is it already a done deal for now until the next management thing?
Yes, so the dog management plan had a big review, which you may feel around at the time, 5 years ago, which attracted a hell of a lot of interest. This 5-year review, apart from these inclusions, was just that Councillor Reid read out, that just better specify responsibilities between council and dog owners. There otherwise we're not proposing any changes to it, and that's what was adopted by council. So it may be being consistent with how I've done in the past, and the next review would be in 5 years' time, unless there's some really urgent need to do it earlier.
And that's what I'm saying. So it would be pointless for us to bang on about what we'd actually like in an ideal world for dog people.
Well, I'm happy to talk to you separate to this meeting to get an idea of those matters, and I can talk to our animal management people to get a reasonable response back to you.
Yeah, it just seems like this lady was just concerned about dogs at large. So there's all these expectations put on the dog owners, but when it is council's turn to actually do something for us who are sort of loaded down with all these expectations, then nothing happens for this lady. I would just, if nothing else, I would just like council and everyone else, all the public, to just, instead of looking at always as an issue about doing things for dogs per se, it's more about being fair and equitable to dogs, people. We're people, and we just happen to have dogs, and that's part of our lives. And we would like a bit of fairness and equity to run our lives and be where we want to be, enjoying things like everybody else, where we want to enjoy them. We don't necessarily have 2 lives where we can just do that for ourselves and then make time for the dogs as well to go somewhere else where we're actually allowed to be. And we want to do it in a nice, pretty, safe, enjoyable environment where we want to be, and do it all at once, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We don't want to have to do it twice and take our dogs to a dog park or thump along the pathways with the traffic in the heat. We want to be at the beach and enjoying our lives in one go. That's all. And just think of it as fairness and equity to people who happen to have dogs, just like people who have kids or no dogs or whatever. We're all just people wanting to enjoy the beaches like everybody else. That's all. And a bit of access and safeness, not a rocky outcrop somewhere.
I can assure you, Sheree, that those things are taken into account when the people
I'm
do
sure,
discuss
I
it.
don't doubt it, Kerry, but I just think
Dog owners too.
sometimes the weight is given to the complainants. You never hear about all the joyous things that go on at the beach where people meet each other and have wonderful times, and it's because they have dogs that these things happen. But you don't hear about them, you just hear about the complaints that come in from the odd person throughout the year. And the rest of the time, it's nothing, but I might have to just start writing letters to council about all the joyous occasions that we have, letter after letter after letter.
And we do have people balancing those things up, and for those, most of us were around the very passionate side of the argument here. It does run like a set of scales, and the noisy ones can be on either side. Our role as councillors and council officers to weigh up all that, as the General Manager said, in many different aspects of it, and work as best we can. We do take that role extremely serious, because we know it is a very passionate subject in the community, and a lot of us are dog owners.
Well, we're usually the ones who are cleaning up the beach at the same time. We're picking up our own dog's stuff, and we're picking up the human trash as well, that's left, nappies, tampons, anything that you can see. They're all there on the beach, and we're picking that up as well.
Thank you.
Natalie Lewisham, going on from the dog management thing. There are issues for a lot of people with regard to the access onto dog areas during the summer months, particularly Red or Blue Lagoon, and also on Park Beach in the small area that is available for use for dog owners. Okay, so would it not be reasonable to allow dog owners to walk their dogs on leads from easily accessed points like the surf hub and the parking area at Park Beach to and from the dog areas, rather than making people struggle down the actual access to the dog beach area? It's not tenable for a lot of people, older people, people with disabilities, people who might have children as well. So this is an awkward thing for a lot of people. And I do not see how it can be unreasonable for us to walk our dogs through a dog area, as long as they are on a lead and under effective control, to get to the points. So it makes it easier for people with ability problems, okay? And the same thing with the Blue Lagoon, the access there. It's ridiculous. We are on rocky outcrops. I get that people don't want to be bothered by the behaviour of dogs. However, if you're there one day before the dog beaches are closed, or one day after, and you see how wonderful most people are enjoying those areas when they have their dogs and their children and their friends, it is beautiful and it needs to be acknowledged. It just makes life very difficult. And I think a lot of dog owners are very responsible. We have to be. When we take on a dog, we take on the responsibility of looking after that animal's needs, not only its physical, but also emotional. And for a lot of us, dogs are our lives, and it just seems very difficult for us a lot of the time in the way that things are managed. And there's an awful lot of fines and penalties and all the rest of it. I'd love to see some dished out to the parents of children who are actively destroying the dunes on Park Beach, where they undermine it, or the people who are leaving their disgusting rubbish. I mean, if you've got plenty of people out there issuing fines, the dog people out there issuing fines, how about issuing fines to the rat bag element as well? There's other issues, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And that, I strongly suggest you take up the opportunity that the members of having that discussion and putting those points. We are aware of all those things. Laws aren't usually made for good purpose.
This is true.
And I just checked with the general manager on here, but our enforcement officers just aren't dogs. They are also do a lot with handicap parking. We don't worry too much about the time parking around Sorell, but our officers certainly have a certain amount of powers under the Act, and that includes rubbish and dumping rubbish, and a summary of those fines and activities you'll find is spread across a lot of different parts of the community. But people don't do it in front of them either all the time. The marvellous thing about social media or with smartphones now is that is becoming easier for people to report and activate. So we are seeing a greater input to how our officers operate off community information, but they do cover a huge array of activities, not just dogs.
But as I understand it, there is problems with filming people and then distributing that
How you distribute
to like the council or to whoever.
it. Filming is a little bit different to taking a photo of somebody's doing something wrong. I haven't heard of
Are we
cases.
able, so if we photograph somebody doing something wrong, we can send it to council.
Just clarification from General Manager, I know the police have requested photographs of people like on beaches on Primrose Beach that are doing the wrong thing, and identification of those. Our officers have in the past said if they can identify the dog that's doing the wrong thing, it's marvellous how many dogs they know, which is sort of scary in a lot of aspects, or good in a lot of aspects, I suppose, too. But identification is by those photographs, so.
Yeah, I'm no expert on privacy laws or what you can and can't do, but I'll certainly take that up with Darren, who's our senior compliance officer, who knows that stuff better than I do about if people are witnessing pumping taking place and want to record it for us or for the police, just what the requirements are around that. I'm happy to clarify that, but I don't know off the top of my head.
It's just that if you've got people, for instance, with children and you start taking photographs, suddenly things get interesting.
Yep.
Shall we say?
Discretion should be used.
Indeed.
Just an addendum to what Natalie was saying with access. One thing, we got caught out once a few years ago, walking on the Tangara trailer. We left from 7 Mile, gone as far as whatever, turned around and came back. And by the time we got back, it was after 10 o'clock, which meant that technically we weren't allowed to have our dog on the beach once you get onto the beach, but you've got to get onto the beach to get back to the car park. And it's about, I don't know, 50, 70 metres or something, right? And it just seems ludicrous to me that part of the beach is shut off. It's not your area?
No, go for your life. Just, go for it. It's,
Fair enough.
just as Kerry said, it's fine. No,
Who
that's
belongs to that?
Clarence.
Clarence.
Yeah, Clarence,
Oh,
yes, yeah. They have similar sorts of issues, of course, as areas. I've got to say, our officers are fantastic at what they do. When you look at some of the situations they have to go into, I'm not talking about all the good people, but if you look through the agenda, the amount of aggressive dogs that they have to handle, the situations that I've seen personally where they've had to deal in handing dogs back and with police involved, neighbourhood disputes, they do an absolutely magnificent job of keeping the peace. Darren's a fairly intimidating bloke, those have met him with his deep voice and everything, but he really is a gentle giant. Russell is just amazing in his care for some of the dogs that we do have to take in because they're either lost or violent, is way past what their job normally entails. So, you know, it's easy for us to say counsel one way or the other, but they really do take their job seriously and have a lot of passion for it as well. Any other questions?
Just to thank you, Mayor. I do believe Carl Street's been put back in his right position.
I noticed them up there making some movements when the General Manager and I were coming back. That was certainly part of our discussion. I got quite excited because I thought we was about to get planning approval to move into Mount Garrett, but
It doesn't take much to excite you, does it?
let's say desktop studies are not always the best from a political office.
You'll be interested to know how that happened. How a sign, 2, 3 signs get made and they're all wrong. Someone must have put something in, wouldn't have been done every ferry.
We're still discussing a lot of the signage and landscaping arrangements for all that work. So I believe there'll be some more changes coming through next year as well. Sarah, you want to?
Yeah, I was just hoping to get some clarification on something that we spoke about. With the CCTV TV cameras, the council-owned cameras, you were speaking about how they were going to be redirected directly to the new emergency services depot. I just wanted to make sure that that was absolute and whether or not it was all the cameras or just some of the cameras.
Through me, it would be all our cameras.
Yeah.
In that it's the fibre link, so they can just directly access without having to come and make requests to our staff. So
Yes, yeah.
I can confirm, but I suspect should be all cameras.
Yeah, and it's absolutely going to happen quickly and.
We have a budget allocation to facilitate that, and
That's great.
we're,
Yeah.
it's in the process of being done as part of the build.
Fantastic, thanks. I just wanted clarification
Yeah,
on
I
that.
think
because I
when we
wasn't sure
talk on,
whether- Yeah,
when we talk on the phone,
Yeah.
one of the big issues with cameras, and as the generator said, they don't appear to be deterrent to a lot of the
Yes,
people that are coming,
yeah.
that they actually look at it and wave and smile and do all sorts of
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's a competition, but overall, most people are quite conscious of it. They are also used in traffic management, accidents,
yes.
all
Yeah.
sorts of various issues. And as I explained, a lot of our private ones in businesses are also used. One of the biggest things about CCTV is it doesn't solve the problem, but it's an enormous amount of hours to find those bits of footage. When
Yes.
you go from camera to camera and then downloading it, I know, for instance, I can tell you that if I have a break-in at my business, it's approximately about 24 hours over a fortnight that you have working with the police and insurance companies and taking footage and looking through it all, that just gets blown away from it. Quite often the police will walk in and are surprised that you know how to operate your system, because most people don't know how to operate the system. The police are in the same boat. The cost of having somebody just looking at it. So cameras are getting a lot smarter these days about, and we hear all the bad news or the bad press about facial recognition, but in a few years' time, that's just going to be a standard way of cameras operating. But at the moment, they are censored, so you're not filming all the time. You're only filming while somebody's or something is moving.
Yeah.
So
Time, yeah.
as technology gets smarter, so is our ability to be able to read that information. Also, the cameras are developing quickly, and the generator touched on the point of we are fairly constantly upgrading the techniques. For instance, now you have cameras that can actually zoom in on a number plate and take the number of the number plate, or infrared, the colour, how much light is needed in a certain area for the cameras to pick up detail of a incident. Is quite significant these days, and you'll see that the cameras have a little light on, and that's subtle little LED is enough to give it the infrared and pick up the colour, which makes a big difference on the, instead of everybody wearing black hoodies, you can actually pick logos and that a lot better in it. Slowly becoming an expert on it because of break-ins of my own business, and you learn a little bit each time.
Yes, yeah.
But yes, it is, and even areas like Primrose Sands, when we had all the fires down there, the police and neighbourhood watch were heavily involved in funding and putting cameras into strategic places that are best suited for them to monitor those communities. So you can't put it on every toilet block or every amenities going in or out. You just wouldn't have enough cameras in the world to do it. But
do you think having it fed into directly to them is going to make a difference and make it easier for them to do their job?
Look, you can imagine, for instance, if a COVID hits and there are a couple of people down for the night.
Yeah.
How easy would it be to police the municipality by just having somebody sitting there watching the cameras and only going out when there's a bit of an issue? You know, there's management techniques of how you can operate, or if you identify that a heap of people are gathering around a certain area, you know, we better just go down and tap those young people on the time for them to head off home.
Yeah.
So that it's got management techniques that aren't always about catching a perpetrator, but also crowd control, crowd management, or just traffic management. So you think that it would be of benefit as we start to be smarter on how we use those devices.
Thank you.
Could I just ask one other question? Could you tell me what the mess is up near Paulina Road? Every time I go past, the mess seems to get worse. The traffic gets slower, and they don't seem to be developing in any way. What's it all for?
Yeah, a lot of the work to do with the development of the large subdivision, the sewage main and water need to be brought down the side of the road. So that's why they're down near opposite KFC, working now in sections at a time. At the intersection of Paulina Road, there is a roundabout going there, but before you put the roundabout in, there's a massive amount of extra pipe work, service work has to be done on both sides of the road. And because of the traffic movements, you just can't dig it up, stop, and do it all in one go. So it's taken a while, but it won't be much longer, and they'll start to form up the whole roundabout, new intersection there to manage traffic a lot better.
Councillor Tarani's mentioned about the water on the bridge. I think a lot of the problem is coming from that work that's taking place there, because tonight that bridge was really dangerous. It was bad.
I think we'll find, and I've made note of it here, just to remind the general manager that get somebody to have a quick look at it in the morning probably, although it's a main roads bridge, but the bridges have holes along the bases to get the stormwater off the bridge, and any sort of silt build up blocks that, and it's only got to hold it up by an inch, and you have an inch of water on different parts of the bridge then. I know that was the issue a while back, so just check that out.
Thank you.
Yes,
Just another question. With regard to the money to be spent on the foreshores, so what amount of that 2.4 million is actually going on to mitigation work along the foreshore pollution, between Charter Street and...
None of that money is for that sort of mitigation work, as far as I know. It's more for the stormwater and erosion caused by some of those outfalls, I think, is most of it now. I think it was 29 or 42.
Yes, it's a large number.
Yeah, I think it's 29 different outfalls that we have. We've slowly been doing a couple. We did one just near there, and that was the one that opposite Lewis Court, really.
Yes.
Just on that corner where it's done, and go there now, you really have to look to see it's started, they've planned it all out, and it's hardly noticeable now. So there'll be a lot more of that done, which will prevent some of the other damage. The actual issue of along the foreshore there is still before the government with measure controls there.
The state government. Is the actual reserve in front between the water, obviously, and the rough houses there, is that council land or is that Crown land?
Crown.
It's all Crown land? Okay, all right, so just need to show. It's just that a lot of people interfere with the vegetation there. We have this particularly interesting scything wind that seems to come through and cut all the trees off at a lovely angle. So
Very clever, isn't it, Mother Nature? It cuts them all.
Very interesting. It's a
Would that be?
real peculiar thing. And some of the bullshit that we've been told is quite interesting. Again, if we photograph somebody actually interfering with said vegetation and send the photos to Crown.
Worst problem with Crown is that they are grossly understaffed and underfunded. That's probably the only defence I can think of for them, because they're frustrating for us to deal with as well. I wish they did have more, because you've probably read in the papers, Clarence had major issue with tree poisoning on waterfronts. We certainly have had several along Rampton's Road, along the Lewisham, and other areas of southern beaches. That is disappointing, to say the least. In fact, it's bloody frustrating that people think their importance of a view against holding the native vegetation and holding preventing erosion is more important. It's a very hard one to police, though, but unfortunately we have very limited input into that.
Right, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Good meeting. Excellent to have you along and asking questions. Thank you very much for your attendance. We just have to move into close for a few minutes. So that's always our pleasure.
Is it one of you didn't have Christmas fair?
Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah, ho, ho, ho.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Hey, Sharon.
Congratulations to everyone.
Sorry. Yeah, take care, bye. I'm sorry about that.
Can I have a move from second to move